For a champion with the coolest walk animation in the game, Lissandra sure is one of the most forgotten about champions in League. This alien-looking ice switch has seen her time in the spotlight, and it seems like the latter half of this season may be another one of those times, as people start to pick her more and more. But while most people pick Lissandra in the mid lane, there are many people overlooking another position where she could perform well in: support. I have to throw out another big thank you to both Workman and Afia from the Discord server for finding one of the highest ranked Lissandra supports in the world. And also a big shout out to all of you who suggested Lissandra support as well. I read every comment and love seeing who you guys want me to do a video on next. The player we're analyzing today is known as xradtiwentx, and because that's way too much of a mouthful to say, I'm just going to be calling him X for the rest of the video. X is a true Lissandra support one trick, very occasionally playing Vel'Koz support as well, who has climbed up the NA ladder this season with some impressive results. I reached out to X a few times over the past week, but since I am not a household name by any means, I was met with a simple what and a subsequent block on the League of Legends client for adding him too many times. And I can't really blame him. If someone had added me 10 times in a row, I would probably block them as well. But because of that, I can only make assumptions about him as a player, so I'll tell you what I know for sure. He seems to be playing on a Smurf account, only having ranked history spanning back to about 2020. In Season 10, he stuck pretty close to the book, playing meta supports like Bard and Karma, but also getting a little wild and playing games as both Gragas and Shen support as well. In Season 10, he was able to play these champions all the way into Grandmaster, but Lissandra was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until this season that he switched to Lissandra support almost exclusively. As of now, he's played a total of 215 solo queue games, of which 113 of those are played as Lissandra support. He's been able to retain a 54% win rate as her, where he once again has pushed himself into Grandmaster tier, where he continues to climb higher and higher to this day. And there are some obvious reasons why people don't think of Lissandra as a support champion, so let's talk about those first. Even more of a detriment than on Shen support, Lissandra has some crazy long cooldowns, hindering her ability to be effective in between her casts. With most of her abilities, Lissandra needs to be close to be effective, which can regularly mean her death. Lissandra really has no sustain and poor tank stats, meaning that she can easily be poked in lane if you're not careful. And finally, and most importantly, she literally murdered and possessed Ashe and Sejuani's sister, which is just plain cold-blooded. But even with all of these potential problems, X has found a way to make it work. At level 1, X grabs his Q or Ice Shard ability. Ice Shard is a short-range line skill shot that does damage and slows enemies hit. After hitting one enemy, the shard will break into a cone behind that enemy. He's mostly using this ability in lane to poke when available, and depending on what he wants the lane to do, he'll decide how to use it when he's hitting minions to expand it into that cone shape. If he wants the lane to push, hitting multiple minions with the ability isn't a bad thing, but most of the time, if he wants the lane to freeze or stay where it is, he'll instead hit as few minions as possible to get that cone effect. It's almost always safer and more valuable to try to use Ice Shard through minions, as it extends the range a bit and allows you to more easily hit your opponents. He maxes this first and tries to use it to whittle down the enemy lane as much as possible from safety. At level 2, he'll level up his W or Ring of Frost ability. Ring of Frost makes a large AoE around Lissandra that roots enemies within it for up to 1.5 seconds dependent on your level. X normally doesn't have many opportunities to use this ability at level 2 unless an enemy engages on him, but if him and his ADC are able to push for level 2 advantage, it can mean an easy kill against squishier targets if he flashes in. Ring of Frost serves X as both a catch and disengage tool. It's pretty powerful, but that power comes with a cost of a long 14-second cooldown at level 1. It's important that he saves this ability for when he knows he has a gank coming for his lane, needs to slow down an aggressor, or he can grab a kill. At level 3, he takes Lissandra's E or Glacial Path ability. It's a slow-moving line skill shot that at any point during the missile, Lissandra can choose to reactivate it to blink to it. It's Lissandra's longest range ability, so you gotta note that you can use it across multiple walls or just much larger walls than many other champions have the capability capability of. Because it's so slow, it's very telegraphed, and X mainly uses it aggressively when he has backup from his team, an enemy is just out of range of everyone else, or he wants to trigger electrocute. The majority of the time though, this is his panic button, when a fight is hitting the fan or he's getting ganked. He has great discipline throughout laning phase to hold on to this ability until it's necessary to use. He also does this little combo that I like to call the Lissandra goodbye, where he will cast his E in the direction that he wants to escape, use his W to snare the enemy or enemies chasing him, and then get the hell out of there. He's never using this ability in lane to just harass. If you thought the cooldown for W was long, this bad boy at level 1 is on a 24-second cooldown, and since he maxes his ability last, it will pretty much stay there for the majority of the game. His laning phase consists of whittling enemies down with his Q, looking for opportunities to burst low health enemies and capitalize on ganks, and staying safe. It's so important to stay safe and alive throughout all fights in the game because of Lissandra's passive. It's where a lot of value comes from in Lissandra Support. When an enemy champion dies near Lissandra, she turns them into a thrall that will then pursue the next closest enemy, slow them in a radius around them, and then explode and do damage after 4 seconds. You don't even need to get an assist when an enemy dies, you literally just need to be near them for a thrall to spawn. But keep in mind that you also need to be alive. Her passive, while largely unused when 1v1ing in the mid lane, makes it so that Lissandra Support can snowball any fight that she's a part of when someone in bottom gets a kill. In larger fights, this can be devastating for the enemy team, as multiple thralls can do massive damage to the team as a whole. Finally, at level 6, X grabs his ultimate or Frozen Tomb, stunning an enemy for 1.5 seconds, doing massive damage to them, and offering some solid AoE around them is enough to make this ability great for picks. But having the option to use it on himself also gives him some additional playmaking ability. Aside from being a bait god whenever multiple enemies are trying to dive on him when his team is around, one added hidden benefit is the ability to make some nasty turret dives on the enemy bot lane. He starts the engage by doing damage before his team, ensuring the turret will target him first, and then he ults himself when close to death to juggle the damage onto another teammate. It's a great option when you're ahead, but most of the time he really wants to use his ult on an enemy. He's looking for overextended enemies or squishy carries to target so his team can capitalize on the lockdown, which is a great segue into combos. Pre-6, your combos are pretty simple, and which one you use is really dependent on how far away you are from the enemy. If he needs to engage and is very far away, he will first use his E to gap close in, hopefully hitting the enemy with the claw as well, then use his W to snare them in place and do more damage, and finish them off with a Q when they're immobile to 100% hit it, and then proc his electrocute as well. Remember, he typically doesn't really want to use his E because it's on such a low cooldown and his only escape mechanism. So if someone is within range, he will preferably use Q to slow them down and do damage, allowing him to move closer, then use W to root them for his team to catch up and do more damage, and then auto attack to proc his electrocute, or E to escape and do more damage if necessary. And of course, if they're super close, he'll instead use his W first to root them, then use Q while they're immobilized, and save E either for damage or an escape or pursuit later. Post 6, when you have your ultimate, the combos once again depend on your range from the enemy. If they're very far away, he'll again use E to gap close in, hopefully hitting the claw to do more damage but doesn't have to, then use ult to stun them and do more damage, follow up with a Q while waiting for that 1.5 second stun to expire, and then finally use W to do more damage and stack the CC on the enemy appropriately, potentially immobilizing them for up to 3 seconds. Alternatively, if they're close enough, he may start with ult, locking them up, use Q while they're stunned, activate W once the stun has expired, and then save E to either again do more damage or run away just like the pre-6 combos. And since saving E is so important, it would be great if he had another gap close somewhere in his kit. But she just does... Oh, hold on. Yeah? Uh-huh. There's an item for that? Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. And there's an item for that he builds every game. Rocket Belt. By mid-game, he has enough money for Rocket Belt, allowing him to go just a bit further to ult unsuspecting enemies, or in some occasions to allow him just a little bit more room to escape from enemies. He finds it essential on Lissandra Support, and I can see why, as it offers him so much more utility when he just needs a little bit more room. Also in the mid-game, X can roam, but it's scary for Lissandra Support to go anywhere without the buddy system. So instead of just roaming through the jungle to another lane as a squishy bait, he typically likes to stay side by side with one of his carries, using vision and his ultimate to catch out and lock up enemies who are just a little bit too far from home. Team fighting as Lissandra, X plays somewhat cautiously. Again, Lissandra's passive triggering can offer a lot of value and snowball in a team fight, so staying alive is normally imperative, unless he sees a big juicy 3-man snare waiting for him that will turn the tide of battle for his team. Most of the time how he plays a team fight revolves around his ultimate. When his ultimate is available, he's hunting for high value targets to lock down. He doesn't try to force and engage with his E as much unless someone on his team has locked someone down first. In this team fight example, he stands his ground until finally the team fight breaks out. Instead of wasting his ultimate on the Yasuo he knows will die, he holds onto it for the unsuspecting Graves, guaranteeing them the team fight win once he falls. Once he uses his ultimate offensively, he then heavily turns into a peel support for his carries, slowing enemies down with his Q and W abilities to allow them enough time to output damage. Without his ultimate, he loses his biggest pick ability, so when it's on cooldown, this is the best option most of the time. Another teamfight scenario though is when the enemy team decides to focus him first instead. If he has multiple enemies targeting him, he can decide to use his ultimate on himself to waste their time. In this example, the enemy team fully commits on his backline to where he counter engages on the enemy backline. While his team cleans up the first 2 divers, he is effectively slowing down the other 3 champions and wasting 5 seconds of their time by using his ultimate on himself and then his Zhonya's. By the time the enemy finally can kill him, the teamfight is already a 4v2, allowing them to win and secure one of the final dragons. Some quick Lissandra tips and tricks. We talked about earlier how telegraphed Lissandra's E can be, so a great option when you have vision is to use it through walls. This way your target won't see the particle until it's far too late and you get the jump on them. Another tip for Lissandra's E, you know that you can reactivate E at any point during the cast to travel to it, but also a few frames after the particle disappears you can still travel to it. This can surprise some enemies. And finally, just be careful when using your ultimate on an enemy that's right on top of you. Lissandra's hitbox is literally massive, so it can be easy to mess up and ult yourself when you intend to lock down an opponent. For his build, he starts every game with a Spell Thief's Edge. He'll then rush for his Mythic item, always getting a Hextech Rocket Belt. Along the way, he's building his tier 2 boots, getting Boots of Lucidity the majority of the time, or potentially Sork Shoes if he's ahead or against squishier team comps. He pretty much always wants to get his Zhonya's Hourglass next as a core item, and he may build an Oblivion Orb along the way if the enemy team has some solid healing. If they do, he'll of course finish with a Morellonomicon, or if not, he'll instead opt for a Cosmic Drive for cooldown reduction. He pretty much never buys elixirs as his build is kind of pricey and the games really don't go that late, but if he did, he could buy an elixir of sorcery. And throughout the whole game, as a good support does, he's buying control wards, and potentially buying a ward stone or a void staff if the game goes very late. For his runes, he takes Electrocute to help with burst, Cheap Shot for the same, Eyeball Collection for snowballing, but Ghost Portal or Zombie Ward could work here too, and Ultimate Hunter. He also brings Overgrowth to become less fragile, and Bone Plating because it's just the best rune. For his flex runes, he brings 2 Adaptive Force and either Armor or Magic Resist depending on his lane opponents. Lissandra Support works well with ADCs with good all-in like Samira or Tristana, or ADCs with CC like Ashe or Caitlyn. Lissandra Support struggles against long-range supports and ADCs like Xerath or Vel'Koz, and Ezreal or Sivir. Thanks guys, leave me a like or subscription if you liked the video. Go ahead and check out our Discord, or go check out our last video on Shen support if that interests you as well. See you guys next time. Peace.